as I took this position on, my goal was I had a professor when I went to college that was heavily influenced my life, built confidence in me when I had none. It really made me feel like I could be successful in my career. And, as I departed CSU, I'd always had in the back of my mind, I want to be that influence for other people. And one day, once my expertise was to the point where I felt like I could provide that. And I feel like, a little bit of winning this award helps validate that.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Habitual Growth Podcast. I've got a very good friend of mine on the show today, somebody that I've been really excited to bring on because not only have we known each other for a long time, I've got to watch his career progress over the last 20 years at this point, Kevin.
Yeah.
But Kevin is actually front and center on one of the big topics that continues to be in the media today, and that's Gen Z. That's education and what's happening really with AI in the minds of some of these younger generations. So without further ado, Kevin, can you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and what you're doing these days.
Yeah. So Kevin Kuhnen, I am an instructor at Colorado State University. Teach professional selling, teaching in the marketing department here. I teach professional selling. I teach a capstone class. I teach advanced selling. Most of our selling classes are what I'm going to specialize in. And that comes from my background. I was a graduate from here at Colorado State University and went out to pursue a career in sales. Spent about a decade total in sales. Most of that was in medical sales. And then I ended up in a situation where medical sales wasn't fulfilling my joy anymore. The stress of it was getting to be a little too much, as well as a lot of the travel. And that travel was putting a lot of strain on my family life. And as my wife and I were having kids, we both agreed that it would be a better solution for me to change careers. And one of those things that as you progress within your career, you start kind of exploring, what am I good at? What do I enjoy doing? What is passionate for me? And one of those that I really kept coming back to was teaching and helping others. So I was very fortunate that I'd always remained in contact with some of my old professors here at CSU, and I reached out to them and basically said, my thoughts are, I want to teach at CSU. Give me a rundown of what you think about this. And they were wonderful mentors for me. They were able to kind of paint me the roadmap that I needed to get where I needed to be today. And so back in 2019, I started up teaching as an adjunct faculty member. About 3 years later, I got picked up full time. And so I'm now in my 7th year of teaching here at Colorado State.
7 years. I didn't even realize it was that long. I was going to say like 3 or 4, but you're not telling the best part about what happened to you last year. And I do want you to highlight that, pat yourself a little bit on the back, because that's a big accomplishment.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So I was recognized as the 2025 Teacher of the Year for my teaching skills last semester. It is a university-wide award. So I was only one of 6 faculty members across the entire campus. We have about a total of 2,200 faculty members here at CSU. And I was recognized as being one of the best on campus. So very large award. It's the largest award I can win here at CSU. It's a lifetime award. It's incredibly humbling. It's incredibly special. As I took this position on, my goal was I had a professor when I went to college that was heavily influenced my life, built confidence in me when I had none. It really made me feel like I could be successful in my career. And, as I departed CSU, I'd always had in the back of my mind, I want to be that influence for other people. And one day, once my expertise was to the point where I felt like I could provide that. And I feel like, a little bit of winning this award helps validate that. I get to fill my cup through multiple ways through the students, but without a doubt, winning the award was one of those things that just says, okay, I'm on the right path. I'm doing the right thing. I'm in the right place.
That's awesome, man. And I wanted you to share that because I think, number one, it is a huge achievement. And of course, like as a friend, I'm extremely proud of you. But two, it just goes to show the work that that you're doing and what's really lighting you up from the inside. I've seen your sales progression throughout your career to where you are today, as a professor. And it was only when you started teaching that I really saw you light up. There was just a difference in your passion. There was a difference in the energy that you really put in. And I think it's really important to talk about. And we'll get to that a little bit later in the conversation. But, you mentioned you're 43. I'm right there with you. And so we've been out of the college educational, front for a couple of decades,
Yeah.
if you will. It's a different culture. It's a different type of environment. There are new challenges. There's new technology that a lot of these young adults face. And today, I really want to dive into, young adults and even this transition between education and then getting into the professional world. That's an area that a lot of our listeners are really trying to understand. How can, if you're a parent of young adults, what do you need to start preparing yourself for and your kids for? If you're a young adult and you're entering, the professional world, or you're about to get into college, what is that going to look like? So let's just talk about some of the challenges that are being communicated to you, that you're listening to your students talk about, some of the problems that they might be having. Where are you kind of seeing these greater topics come up?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. With commonality that I am seeing within my 7 years I've been here at CSU often lies in perception and the perceptions that students have when they are attending a higher education, whether it's at CSU, whether it's other universities. And a lot of the perception is, if I go to college, if I do well in college, then I will be given a job, a career where I will be making massive amount of money, 6 figures right out of college, and I'll have to and, show up and sit at a computer, and they're going to just throw money at me. And every summer I anticipate, and this summer was no exception to this rule, I always anticipate receiving about 5 phone calls, give or take a couple, where they're from past students or current recent graduates that have accepted a position and they're struggling. They hate it. It wasn't the beautiful sunshine and rainbows that were painted to them their entire career, and probably painted a little bit to me as well. As sales is kind of a natural skill set that we have, if we've had a career within it. I definitely sell the upside of sales. I try to highlight some of the struggles and some of the challenges that come with it. But it's actually led me to do a lecture day where I tell the students, I'm like, look, your first job out of college is probably going to suck. You have to realize you are going to become a freshman again. Nobody tells them this, right? Is that you've achieved the end goal. The end goal is to get that college degree for those that are not going to go on for more degrees. And if you've achieved this end goal, you got to remember now, just like when you came into college, being a freshman's tough. It's hard to face change. It's hard to find new friends. And as you enter into the workforce, that's the exact same transition you're making. You're going in, you don't know anything compared to the people like you and I that have had 20 years of experience in our belts. We don't know anything compared to the people, our elders that have had 20 more years of experience on top of what you and I've had. So I try to remind them, like, look, be a sponge, be observant, be willing to learn things, because that's what's going to ultimately leads you to growth within your career. And rather than just expecting people to be giving you things and just the world to be coming to you and be easy for you.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a lot of preparation in the high school years that get the students prepared, or is it more of a rude awakening and that just becomes the biggest problem? And I just
Yeah.
real quick section here from my own perspective, like I remember taking my freshman year and it was hard. And I had my own businesses in high school. I was paying for certain things around the house. Yes, my parents helped me purchase a car and things like that. So I had some autonomy, but it was still a very tough transition. And it was like the world was starting to not be as friendly as it used to be. It wasn't as structured. And I'm just wondering what you're seeing from a structure standpoint versus a mentality standpoint.
Yeah, excellent question. I can't speak directly to the facts of that because I'm not familiar with the high school system and what they're educating students. So I'm going to speak purely from an opinion and what I've seen from my end, and discussions that I've had with students. And I think the answer to that is a lot of it depends on the student. I think that there are resources out there that can prepare students for college and what that college challenge is going to look like. Like a lot of things, you don't know how hard it's going to be. You don't know the challenges you're going to face until you jump into it, until you get involved in it. And I have spoke to a lot of students that tell me that when they came into college, it was exactly that. It was the shift. It was hard. It was frustrating. You see, we look at GPAs. I can go back and look at my students' transcripts, and I'll see, 1.5 GPAs their freshman year, and they're automatically put on academic probation. And by year 3, they're in the College of Business. They're taking classes they're passionate about. And now all of a sudden their GPA in a semester is 3.6, 3.7. And they're thriving, they're excelling. And then I see the exact opposite on that as well. I've seen students that come in that college isn't a challenge for them. They just fit right in. It's been part of their nature. And, and a lot of them, I've seen plenty where they've excelled as freshmen and then they start getting into their junior and senior years. And I don't know if it's the workload starting to wear on them, a little senioritis. Senioritis is real. It is a very, very real phenomenon. Spring break is like, after spring break, I don't plan on any big event because it's just show up, just please just get your butts in the seats because it's tough to deal with the seniors sometimes. But you're preparing, for the next step. You got a lot of things on your mind and I get that. So I've seen the opposite as well. People come in, they do really, really well to start off with, and then they tend to fade off a little bit more towards the end. So is there one thing or another that the high schools are doing in order to prepare people for it? I think a lot of it ends up coming down to what did you personally take on and what did you personally go out to seek out to help improve yourself? If you or your family has experience within college, then you're probably more likely to be set up for success when entering into college. If you're a first generation student and you're growing up in a household where your parents worked, it's starting at 16, 17, 18, and they never did attend higher education, then they have no idea what to expect. So how are they going to educate you as to what to look forward to in college? And what I am very proud of is I'm here at CSU and at a lot of universities across the nation, they have a very, very strong support system for any type of students in those situations. Now, like all support systems, it's there if you seek it out. You have to have the motivation to seek it out, though. And that is probably, I think that the usage of that could be higher.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that's very fair. It's actually one of the things that we're working on with habitual growth is the preparation. It is being resourceful. It is getting to think not even outside of the box, but just understand planning strategy, how you're going to attack something as simple as, hey, I'm trying to lose a little bit of weight, or I'm trying to prepare myself mentally for something that's coming down the pipeline, 2-3 months down the line, instead of just walking into a fire and then, all of a sudden it's hot. All of a sudden there's smoke, right? And so we try to get people to really kind of build up their mental resilience. This is a lot of the conversation I was really hoping to have, which is around kind of this perception of what Gen Z looks like in today's world. I'm a professional. I deal with Gen Z out in the workplace. We've all seen kind of how the media portrays them. You've had an interesting now at 7 years kind of front seat to the various, let's say, generational differences of Gen Z, not generational differences, but you get the point. Age differences of Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
7 years ago, you're starting to get to, I guess, the tail end of Gen Z coming up now. There is this perception of a little bit of nihilism given in today's society. I don't know if that's just the fact that this is kind of how the educational system has gone. I don't know if it's lack of preparation in the family units. Do you see that kind of monologue or that thought process of like, well, it doesn't really matter right now? Has that changed over the course of your years being at CSU and seeing these students come through?
Yeah. So lots to digest there. Have I seen a fluctuation with denialism? No, not really, to be honest with you. Granted, I don't spend a lot of time talking about my students, psychological or religious beliefs in any way, social beliefs. So it's tough to me to talk directly, to what they feel or how they feel there. I do feel like this generation, I have seen a shift. Let me start here. I've seen a shift since when I started in 2019. So I started spring of 2019. So I had a year under my belt before COVID came in and hit us. And in 2000, the early 2000 or 2019, I had engagement. I had student work ethic. It felt like people that were at school appreciated they were at school. They wanted to be a part of school. And then we went through this shift as COVID hit. And, we were being instructed here, like, do the best you can. Don't hold them to very high standards because we don't know what's going on. This is all new for everybody. And at the time we were all saying, okay, we're going to do this. And it does feel like the right thing to do. But we also knew that there was going to be a backlash to this, because if we were hand holding the whole way through for 2 years, what were those students that were coming up next? What were they going to look like? And we have seen this hangover from this, and that students that the work ethic's not there. They're expected to be given an A when they don't do things right, when they don't put in the effort, when they don't deserve the A. They're just expected to be given things. And again, this isn't for everybody. This is, a generality that I've seen. And there's definitely exceptions to this all the time. I have a student right now that was just in my office before this call, and I would hire this guy to run Coca-Cola in 5 years. I mean, he is so sharp. He's so bright. He's so driven. And, so is this everybody? No, not in the slightest bit. But in commonality within the classroom, I definitely see this. However, even though we've seen this shift of, almost like a lack of work ethic, what we see instead is engagement. They really strived and they really thrive for the engagement. And so our student organizations, our student clubs, participation within these are blown up. I mean, they've absolutely blown up. If you attend a CSU football game back in 2019, the students section was typically half to three-quarter full on any given day.
Mhm.
It's not only selling out, but if you are not in your, where you want to stand a half an hour before kickoff, you're going to be standing in the end zones, and you're going to be getting bad seats because people want to be involved. They want to be engaged. And, whether it's through athletics, whether it's through social clubs, Greek life's seen a bump, in attendance and participation. And so there's the fun part about this is it does feel like students, going back to what we talked about before, is if you have the access to the resources, are you using them? And I do think that Gen Z is in a situation where they are utilizing a lot more of those resources and trying to become more involved in extracurricular activities rather than just sitting back on their coattails and just coasting through college by going to bars and just hanging out.
Yeah. I love that. And I want to pull on the thread a little bit more because it does feel, the pendulum always swings, right? It goes Republican, Democratic, goes right, left. It always swings. It's never stagnant. And it seems like, if I'm hearing you correctly, things are swinging back to like, hey, we used to live in this isolated world, specifically over COVID. This is supposed to be our best years of high school. Now we're in college. We're going to make the most of it. But do you find community is really being driven harder from that? Or is it more experiential of like, hey, I want to get in front of these things. I want to try out more. I need something different than just sitting in front of a screen. And I ask that because I think that's a big worry for a lot of parents, a lot of older generations that look at younger generations and say, well, they always have their head
Yes.
looking, their eyes in a screen.
Yes. Excellent question here. As parents ourselves, I'm facing this fear, right? As our kids are starting to get older and getting to the point where within the next 5 years, we're going to be having screen conversations. How much screen time do I want to allow? How much is appropriate? The popularity aspect of my friends are doing this. This is a very difficult subject as a whole. I do think that there's a shift in screen usage and wanting to be involved in face-to-face interactions and engagement. Actually, research is showing that there is still a decline in person-to-person engagement within the Gen Z population. And so from what I'm seeing and what the research is showing, there's a little bit of differentiation there. However, I think that it's still a combination. I think there's still high screen usage, much more so what, as a parent, we'd probably be okay with. But we kind of feel like especially when you get to college too, like how much control can I really have over that? And so I think it's still prevalent. I think it's still there. I think there's problems to that. I think that there's also high positivity to it as well. But seeing that students are engaging in these extracurricular activities, are getting involved in different things to help boost their resumes, to start thinking about their future, to be part of a social program. I think that there's a lot of, I think that is a pendulum swing. It's kind of swinging it back after when screens were really, late 2010s, when screens were just becoming a very large problem. And that's what students wanted to be doing on a Friday afternoon, is sitting there Snapchatting or Instagramming or building TikToks, so.
Yeah. It's funny. I have some family members that are of this generation, and it's funny because they will literally be sitting on the couch next to each other, and they'll be texting back and forth or snapping back and forth instead of talking. And it's just, it's funny to watch the experience happen.
It's infuriating. As millennials, I'm infuriated by it. Also, my niece, dropped me a text a little while back, and she says, "Hey, can I go surfing on your boat? Can we go out on your boat and go wake surfing?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely, let's go." So we're out there, and she's on the boat, and she picks up her phone, and she's snapping this guy, and it happens to be a kid that I know that she hangs out with. I know his parents real well, and she's like, "Hey, is it okay if Jacob comes out and surfs with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Come on out." And those two, it felt like when she was on the boat, they were communicating endlessly, right? I mean, it's just snap, 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 snap. They got on the boat together, and I'm like, "Are you guys going to talk to each other? You're now on, like, it's the three of us combined on the boat. I got nothing in common with you guys, so you have to talk to one another."
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just that point of communication has become, it's infuriating for us because we're not familiar with it.
Yeah.
It makes sense to them because they are familiar.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different outlet, and I no longer look at it like good or bad. I mean, it's just it's how we grew up. I mean, we were the last generation that remembers life before social media and
Right.
before cell phones,
Yeah.
right? We were on that cusp in the millennial spectrum. But there is one technology that obviously is getting a lot of attention these days that we need to talk about, and that's AI, right? Social media platforms, screen use aside, and this is kind of why I was poking around the nihilism aspect earlier in the conversation, because using the family members that I talked about that are this, they're in college right now, and it kind of is this aspect of like, well, this thing is coming and I'm just never going to own a house and I'm never going to be able to afford a car and I don't even know if I'm going to have a job. And I think there's this great association of, hey, this big thing is looming that very few people know anything about. How much does that really play into some of the conversations? Not let's talk about the use of AI in the classroom in a separate question, but how much of the mentality or maybe forethought that goes into what's coming from AI plays out in the psyche or the behaviors of the students that you're teaching right now?
Yeah, really good question there, and probably one that would be difficult for me to answer without chatting with a couple of my students about that directly on
Hmm.
the future of AI. What does it look like? What are their thoughts and feelings on it? I can tell you that they're obviously very aware that this is the future. They're a little bit. We're still in this early adoption phase, if you ask me, on AI. As you know, not only them, myself. I'm sure you're in the same boat. It's a wonderful tool. It's amazing, and and it's been incredible for my own personal usage. However, there is a fear, that how deep is this thing going to go? How far are we going to go with this? And how much is this truly going to change our lives? And how quickly is it going to change our lives?
Hmm.
And I know that some of the students feel the same way about that. They're concerned with this. And how many jobs are these going to eliminate? What type of jobs are these going to eliminate? We were talking before we took on the call, and I went on this big fitness kick last year. I hired a personal trainer. Love the guy. He's like a brother to me. I mean, from the day we first worked out, it was amazing how it just felt motivated. He does his job incredibly well, and I'd highly recommend him to anybody. But after working out together for 6 months and seeing a body transformation and gaining the education from him,
Hmm.
I was like, now I have the tools that I need with the assistance of AI, where I can do everything without him. And while it all came down to a value cost evaluation that I had to do. And
Hmm.
unfortunately for him, AI is replacing his job. Now I've been working out without him for about 4 months now. And is it the same quality of workouts? No, he's great at fixing my form. He's great at, showing me where to need to do my stretch down, go deeper in my stretches and things like that. However, is the value that I've gained without him and keeping the money in my own bank account greater for me? Right now it is. I get to do things that I want to do with that money instead. And
Hmm.
students are worried about that. What happens if I go into a career? What happens if I go to college? I end up in $100,000 school debt, and then I go into a career that is obsolete in 5 years. I have a buddy who's a pilot for Frontier Airlines, and he is not allowing his daughters to learn how to fly because he truly believes that by the time that they become of the age to become pilots, that their job will become obsolete. And so, and we're talking 10 years from that, So are we going to be having self-flying planes in 10 years? Probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's real conversations. I mean, my wife and I talk about this all the time, where it's like, things like college education, is that even going to be a thing in 10 years? I
Yeah.
think there's places to get educated, but how much of that is going to be replaced? How much are you seeing the usage of AI in the classroom?
Yeah. Before I answer that question, if I could address, what you kind of just said about it,
Sure,
the
of
replacement of
course.
education. This is actually a pretty fun topic. And I have this topic a lot in class. And I tell my class from day one, I said, you can gain a college education online right now for free.
Hmm.
YouTube is a wonderful resource. If I wanted to, I could build out an entire curriculum. I could go on, I could watch courses, I could buy textbooks, I could do the reading, and I could learn everything that I needed to learn from home. Now, will I earn a degree? No. But can I go on to one of the non-affiliated universities online and achieve that degree for very inexpensive? Absolutely. You gain the knowledge, you can go out and you can attack the workforce. And so the what it where I believe what I think is going to be the savior within college is the college experience. And as we get students that come onto campus, part of the job that I love, I mean, I just absolutely love this aspect, is I am now encountering with this person where I only have them for what I teach. I have them for 2 years, 2, maybe 3 years if they're taking the long route through school like I did.
You got to
But
get the skiing in there somewhere.
yeah, my time's short with them, but they're in this transitional period in their life. They're figuring out what they want to do, and they're preparing themselves to go out and do it. Is this, and they don't have this hovering protection that they've had their entire life by their parents, guarding their back. They're learning how to figure it out on their own. A lot of the things I instill in the classroom is, don't come to me with the questions. Go to ChatGPT with the questions. Go to Google with the questions. Figure out how to do it on your own, because that's exactly what you're going to have to do once you exit out of the workforce. In return, when you get to work with students in that situation, it's amazing the gratitude and the overall just the gratitude that they have for you. I keep all these thank you notes on my desk of students. This is a full letter that a student wrote me at the end of last semester that it sits for me whenever I am low on fuel, whenever I'm kind of running out of energy. I'll pick up one of these and I'll read through it, and twice I've been told that I am the reason that somebody didn't commit suicide. Talk about massive impacts on that. So, at the end of the day, can you get college education elsewhere? 100%. By all means, if that's the right fit for you, then you can do it. I do think that for me, higher education is a little bit more than just education. I think, and I honestly will put that down to where I think education is about 50% of the experience. When you're at college, you're going to get experiences. You're going to gain. If you join a fraternity or sorority, you get the opportunity for philanthropic events. You get the chance for social events. You get the chance to participate in sports. You'll get to meet different people and experience what is their experience in their careers. And at the end of the day, I'm big on whether you're in high school, whether you're in college. If you're outside of college and you're ever experiencing a career change or want to do a career change, you're not happy with where you're at, all you need to do is gain exposure. Go out and gain exposure. And so often that is self-driven. We have to be the ones that say, okay, I'm going to reach out to somebody on LinkedIn and I'm going to say, hey, I'm curious about a career in sales. May I come and do a ride along with you? Every salesperson I know out there, as long as they're not working with privy information, and confidential information or clearances, they're going to be like, yeah, absolutely. Come on out. I'd love to show you what I do. We love socializing. We love working with people. And so, that to me is like that's the biggest thing people can do at this age, right? And that's where college really kind of comes in, is we have the ability to provide exposure in so many different ways to so many different careers. And hopefully we find, a career path that you love through your entire life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And let's keep talking about that for a second, because I 100% agree. If I recall, my college experience, it was hard because you're kind of thrown into the fire, right? I moved from Minnesota to Colorado, didn't know anybody, didn't know a single person that went to school, had to kind of figure it out, new groups of friends.
That's because you picked the wrong school.
Still the right school, let's be honest. But I think it is the college experience. I think you can get that in other places. I think you can get that in the right professional career. Like, I used to work construction as an example. It was a different culture, a different workplace, different personality. You had to figure it out. It was not as with lack of structure, I might say, as the college experience, where I do think you kind of learn a little bit more about adulting. I still think, kids are coming out of college and they haven't quite figured everything else out, because there is a lot of the structure still in college, which is helpful, right? It's a nice, easy transitional period, but you're right. There are so many more elements than just the education that I think is there. That's actually one of the things that we're working on with Habitual Growth, is setting up these event type places where people can go. They can be around like-minded community members. You can get your questions asked. You can learn people or answered. You can, meet new people. You can have different types of experiences, because at the end of the day, you can't remove the humanness from humans, right? And a lot of that is community driven. A lot of that is the emotion that you were just sharing about your letters, your thank you notes, and whatever it is that comes along with the experience. It's that gratitude, it's that love, it's the support that intrinsically we feel, yet oftentimes isn't always necessarily communicated externally. And I think that's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And, actually research backs up your claim on, can we gain that experience? Can we gain that community from trade schools, from, entering into a workforce? Yes. In fact, the more Gen Zs are actually moving away from college, away from higher education, and entering into apprenticeships, entering into professional careers right out of high school, and skipping over college. I've always been, obviously I teach at a university. And so anything I say, probably the biasness, whether I truly believe it or
Mhm.
not. But
Sure.
I mean, I'm always a fan of, do what's right for you, for
Yeah.
whatever fits in your world. Do what's
Yeah.
right for you. I love taking as much information you can gather from your options, evaluating those. I have a whole weighted scale system that I utilize when I make hard life decisions, and then make the best educated decision you can for what's right for you and your situation. You're going to gain a lot of these things. You go to university or go to a college in general, or if you go to work straight out of high school as well.
Yeah.
So
No, and I think this is where, you listen to any successful person or almost any successful person, and one of the common threads is like, just enjoy the journey, right? Oftentimes it's what comes next. So I have to get into college. Okay, did that. Okay, now I have to graduate. Okay, now I have to get a career. And I did that. I played that game all the way through my 30s. And I know you were somewhat similar in this fact. And then you kind of end up you're like in this place of like, well, kind of did all I was supposed to do, but I'm not happy. This isn't where I wanted to be. I don't regret. I've thought about this a lot. I don't regret getting the college education. It set me up for life in a very good way. I still have something I can fall back on even to this day with what we're talking about with AI and the various technological changes. But at the same time, I wish I could take that experience and compact it. And I'm very vocal now around just telling people, get started, right? The path will unfold in front of you once you take the first step. But too often times we're waiting for this. Hey, I've got to graduate before I can do anything else and have a new experience, right? I'm going to live in this 4-year bubble until I go, and then it's going to be a shocker. And I really try, especially like my nieces, to push them to say, "Hey, go get an internship. Hey, go try this thing over here." One of my nieces just went and studied abroad over in England, and it was like, "Hey, should I go do this?" And it was like, "Absolutely, yes. Like, go get that experience." And she moved across the pond by herself for a semester, and it was the best thing that she did, right? But
yeah,
those are the things that I feel like us as adults, like the older generations, should be really communicating more heavily to these younger generations instead of what almost feels like coddling sometimes. It almost feels
yeah,
like, hey, stay here. Like, we like the motion, we like the bond. It's like, no, go get your face kicked in. Like,
that's
go
it.
have the hard experience now because you're only going to enjoy it more, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree wholeheartedly with that. I am a firm believer. I don't want, my kids would get half tuition if they come to CSU because of, employee benefits. I don't want my kids to come to CSU. I'm a 2-time graduate of Colorado State. I love this university. I believe green and gold all the way through. This is a place of passion for me. That being said, I want them to go get a different experience. You've been at Fort Collins your entire life. Go somewhere else. And I firmly believe, yeah, go fail, right? I mean, go suck at something. Go learn what it's like to have to fend for yourself, what it's like to make mistakes, but then learn from those mistakes. You got to build off those. You can't dwell on them. You got to just understand, and make sure that you're carrying your kids. Like my dear colleague, she's a good friend of mine, and she's at the point now. Both she's got a senior in high school. She's got another son that's a sophomore now in college, and she's struggling. She's struggling with them being gone. And I said, this was the goal, though, right? We got to remember this is the goal. You created and you developed two very well behaved gentlemen, and you have them out there chasing their career. They know what they want to do. They've got to be successful in their life. And this is when you had children. This was the entire point of having children. Was to raise them, to let them then leave the nest and go out and be successful on their own. And I get it. It's hard. I think my perspective is I think it's a little bit more hard for women than it is for men. But that's we just got to remember, like a lot of times that's how we learn the stuff, right? It's
Yeah.
just taking that hard step. So
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. Let's speak to the parents of, I don't want to say young children. You and I have very young children. Mine are 7
yeah.
and below. So it's going to be a little bit before they get to this point, but maybe people that have children in high school and even in college, what can they be doing now to encourage this growth, to encourage that mental preparedness and transformation that it's going to need for their kids to ultimately succeed in the real world?
Yeah, and by no means am I a family therapist or where I feel like I'd be truly an expert to speak on this. So I'm going to purely speak on Kevin Kuhnen's opinions on this one. But number one thing for me is make your kids do the things, right? When you are applying for college, make them apply for college. When they have to apply for scholarships, make them apply for the scholarships. All too often, you're going to, like you said earlier, we're going to coddle them. We're going to do things for them, and we fail to make them independent because they are reliant on us. Applying for a scholarship, if you don't get selected for a scholarship, you have to go through the process. You have to think about what is a goal summary going to look like? How am I going to describe myself? How am I going to sell myself in this scholarship so that I have the best chance of earning this scholarship from the university? I jump on and I do it for my own children. They're not thinking about their own goals. They're not thinking about what's best for them. I can polish this thing up. I can probably make it look really good where they're most likely to be selected, but they're not going to take anything from them. We're just going to, we're going to get some benefits from the money aspect, and that's it. So how do they grow from that? And it's easy to say, well, yeah, but that's just one thing. I just applied for their college. I make them play their sports. I make them do their homework and all that kind of things. Yes, it is just that one thing, but it's also kind of what's the book about? Habits. You read the Habit book.
Habits of Highly Successful People.
That's the one, right?
Yeah.
1% theory. Now, every day you strive to get 1% better. And if you make them do that 1% that day that you would have normally done for them, over time, that's going to accumulate. They're going to become more independent. They're going to become more self-confident. And that's an area, confidence area is probably where I fear the most in Gen Zs is, do we have confidence in ourselves? And do we have confidence in our abilities? We have, I'm going to get a little bit off topic here, and I apologize, but we have social media where comparison is the thief of happiness, right? Like, it truly is. And so as we are jumping on TikTok and our friend is dancing better, like, who cares if your friend dances better on camera? You are way smarter than them. You're way more driven. You're way more independent. There's one skill set that they have is better than you, and all of a sudden you're going to fall into depression over this. Like, focus on your strengths, focus on what you do really well. And I think that this generation needs that uplift. They need the boost. So as parents, I really do think that I think that one of the biggest things is let's stop handholding, stop doing all the things for them, make them grind. What about you? What do you think on that one?
That's definitely one of them. And I don't know if you've seen the stats on this. I'm not going to get this exactly correct, but it's pretty astounding when you look at some of the things that parents have done for Gen Z, which to your point, I think is a huge disservice around independence. So independence is a big one, but I saw this about 2 weeks ago. So the percentages may be a little bit off, but the intent is still there. So it's something like 70-something% of parents have applied for a scholarship or to colleges for their kids. There was, I think it's like 62% of parents have called their Gen Z kids' bosses to negotiate or talk to the bosses about something work related. And It's over 50% of Gen Z parents have actually gone into the workplace with their kids. And, I listened to that stat. And then, I think you are 100% correct, but I think more deeply rooted in that independence track is, to me, my perspective is it's the energy of where we're going to pick our battles. And I don't know about you and how you run your family unit with your wife, but as an example, my kids are young and it's still tough to negotiate with a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And if you don't have kids, it sounds really funny to be like, well, just tell them what to do. It's like, no, they have their own personalities. They're going to find their own independence. They're already doing it. And you can't control them. So what you can do is you've got to either pick your battles or just know, hey, this conversation is worth it. And so, I try to look at this childhood journey of, hey, if I don't get in front of this now, this problem is going to be a lot worse later on. And so Bree and I have implemented a rule in the house where it's like, if you want something and you can do it, you need to go do it. Right? You already have chores. They're simple. Like, you need to unload the dishwasher, right? Hey, you want that blanket over there? It's 10 feet. I'm not going to go get it for you. And it's not that I will, like, if they're not feeling well or I'm feeling generous or something like that. But, if you can do it and you just want it and you're whining, pick yourself up and go get it, right? Start helping yourself. And I think that's something that it's the energy that has to go into some of those conversations versus what happens when you don't, and the independence or lack thereof of the independence for this specific generation.
Right. It's funny in that as you brought that up, I'm thinking about my own house, and as like you, I have a 5 and a 7-year-old, and we just recently we bought these milk dispensers. It's just a smaller jug, so it's not as heavy as what a gallon milk jug is. We did this because when they get up in the morning, they grab their cereal, they grab the bowls, they grab the cereal. The only thing they couldn't do was milk. And so now we've created a situation where they can easily access the milk. And as I'm kind of exploring this, we have had spilt milk, right? I mean, we've only been doing this now for a couple of weeks, and I keep, like, every time I see the spilt milk, my initial reaction is just do it for them. right? And make sure I don't have to clean up a mess. And so I can do it correctly. So might as well just go ahead and do that. And it's almost like I have to stop myself in my process, in my thinking, and say, it's just spilt milk, there's no, I'm not going to, use the old don't cry over spilt milk for crazy, but it's just spilt milk. That's all it is. It's a mess. But the confidence that they gain by being able to do this, the independence that they gain, the benefit that I'm going to get from this, that the next time they need milk, they're not going to bug me while I'm trying to watch football on Sundays. So they're going to get the milk. So they'll just go get it themselves. Like, that's a win for me. If I got to clean up a couple of spills here and there, dude, I'll clean it up. But, so it's not natural, right? I mean, a lot of the things we experience, I don't feel like it's a natural thing to say, okay, I have to let my kid do this. And I think we just have to fight that urge sometimes of like, what comes natural for our parenting, what natural feeling are we doing, but also what are the future and how is
Yeah.
it kids? And I saw a stat out there that children who start doing home chores like unloading the dishwasher by the age of 6, like the overall success they experience in life is so much greater than those that don't start chores until they're 10. And I'm not going to quote the numbers. I don't remember them exactly off the top of my head, but it was astounding to see some of the numbers. And just, obviously there's a lot more correlation to that than just doing chores and unloading dishwashers. But man, it's about getting that independence, about getting the confidence.
Yeah, and I want to add to this and I'm going to say this and let's transition because I then want you to speak to the kids that are of age. And I don't want to call them, let's call them young adults of age,
Yeah,
right?
that's for
Those
sure.
in university, things they can be doing now. But, to that point, I think about the world today, and this is my own perspective. We by no means are professional psychologists or the best parents in the world or anything like that. We're just running on our experience and what we see. And what I've realized is one, context is a game changer. And so I no longer tell my kids no without telling them why not, or yes and explaining why not. I think that's really important. And I do that for my nieces too. When something happens, I take the extra effort to say, this is why I think this, or this is my perspective. So you understand why this is happening. It's not just a yes or no. Obviously, that's not every single case, but the extra context then will help them create maybe a psychological map or a mind map of like, hey, now I understand the reasoning behind this. If I want a different result or a different experience, I've got to change the way I ask or the way I behave or whatever it is. Now, behind that, the other thing, and I'm going to use my own kids as an example because I think it applies to young adults these days, but we oftentimes, I think, as parents or older generations, sell younger generations short because we tell them things from our own perspective. So my kids right now are 7, 5, and 2. They hiked their first 14er by themselves when they were 6 and 4, and I had the younger one on my back. And when we started out, it wasn't like we're going to go hike this huge mountain. It was, hey, we're going to go up and we're just going to start hiking. And if we like it, we like it. And Bree and I talked about it beforehand. We just got to the point where we're like, hey, we're never going to tell them it's hard. We're never going to tell them how long they're going to have to hike. We're just going to enjoy the experience. And when we refrained from putting our own basically judgment on what their capabilities were, they hiked an entire damn mountain by themselves. I mean, I carried Kingston maybe a half a mile, but we hiked 8.4 miles that first time. Yes, it took a long time. Yes, it, was a little bit grueling, but they learned that hardship. We didn't bottle them in. We didn't say, you can't do this. It's going to be so hard. It was, hey, you're going to enjoy the views at the top. You're going to be so proud of yourself. You can keep going. Just tell your mind you can do it. And it was a completely different experience. And we got up there and everybody's mind was blown.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the fact that they accomplished it. I mean, yes, that was impressive, but at the same time, it was more of like, wow, what are we doing to these generations that we're saying, you can't do this, or you better watch out, it's going to be so hard? Because naturally, anybody of any age is all of a sudden going to say, well, I can't do that because Kevin told me it was super hard, right? Or, Nate said, you can't do this because it's going to take so long and I just don't want to put in that effort. And so I think the context and the word choice that we need to use has to be so thought out that we don't shut people down.
That's interesting. I love it. I love that mentality, and as you're kind of saying that, I'm thinking that there are times that we do that within our own household, but I'm also thinking back to those young adults that I have in my classroom. My first day is very non-traditional. I break down my teaching philosophy and my expectations within the classroom. I don't talk about my syllabus. I talk maybe 5-10 minutes over what coursework we're going to be doing and what's the expectations there. But really, it's a highlight of what I want from them. The very first thing I always ask for is honesty. Just no matter what it is, be honest with me, because I truly believe it's the lies that get you in more trouble than the actual event that happened. And that's turned into some pretty funny emails, some pretty shocking emails. But I will always credit them when they're honest with me rather than get frustrated with them. But then I go on within what I expect, and one of the things that I talk about is taking responsibility for our actions, right? And whenever I ask that, I always say, what does that mean to you in class? Every single semester, somebody says, well, when you mess up, you accept responsibilities, you say you're sorry, you do what you can to amend it. And I joke, I always say, yeah, that's the thing. And then I make sure that I start mine on the opposite side. I say, what I want you to do is I want you to accept responsibilities for yourself and for your actions when you do really well. And so I have a rule with any of my athletes in class or anybody that's a student in class. If you win anything where you win a medal, you win a trophy, you got to bring it to class, you got to show it off, you got to be proud of it. I'm going to call you out in class. I want you to be proud of that accomplishment. I've been shocked how many track and field medals, how many golf trophies, that get brought to class, and they play like they don't like it, but they feel like they're embarrassed because they have to because they're that age and they can't brag about themselves yet. But I'm going to brag for them, And and I get students that just had a student pop into my office 2 days ago, and he's like, "I need to show you this." It was a brag book. And he's like, "I just got hired by the company of my dreams because you talked about this brag book for me." And and he was you could see the excitement in his face, like he was taking responsibility for his action on the positive aspect, rather than what we always assume that is being the negative aspect. And I think through life, that's an area where if you're great at accepting responsibilities for what you do, when you do well, that's going to advance you within your career. Your superiors are going to recognize it. They're going to know it. And I always tell them too, I'm like, does the best person for the job always get promoted? And everybody's like, no. And I'm like, the person who sells themselves, the person who takes the most credit for themselves, they're typically the ones because the bosses know them. And so I think that's an area there that, kind of plays into a little bit. So.
Yeah, that's great. Keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to talk about that next week. We're going to talk about some top offline. What else can these younger generations do right now to really help themselves get prepared for the workforce?
Yeah. I'm going to go back to exposure. You just start off with, I'm such a proponent on this, and I don't think that enough people do enough of this. Look, I'm a hypocrite too. I didn't do it. I'll admit it, I didn't do it when I was in college, and I should have. I did a little bit within a sales career. I had pretty good ideas of what a sales career was going to look like for me. But when I went out to apply for jobs, we just started the fall semester. Most of my students are going to graduate in the spring. So we're talking about apply for jobs now and get a job offer, get 5 job offers, get 10 job offers. Go out there. Don't stop at one. I talk about how I get 5 to 6 phone calls a summer saying, I hate my job. I hate my life. I'm having coffee right after my class this afternoon with a gentleman who's in a transition period and he graduated 2 years ago. It's out there and it's a problem. And I think the truth is that we get this one offer and we're so excited that somebody wants us that we're just like, okay, I'm done. I've achieved that goal. I've reached that goal. Mm-hmm. And so then they stop the application process. Why stop at that point? You now have the world at your fingertips because you got something to fall back on. You got the worst case scenario now that you can go to when maybe there's a better job out. And even if it's not, even if you go out and you're applying for all these positions and nothing else comes along that's better, great. You did your research, you found out about everything. But even more so, you practiced interviewing. Another great skill set that you and I both know, trying to thin the meat in a company, trim the meat in a company can be difficult. There's legal restraints that we have to follow, and just getting on with a company, that's half the battle. And once you're on, then you got to develop your reputation. You got to grow and do what's best for you. But how do you get in? How do you get on with a company? And, why hinder yourself from that experience because you're too lazy? Because why did you stop? Why did you ever stop looking for a job just because you found one? So I think that's another thing. Is when you get ready to go into the workforce, keep looking, just keep looking. And then you get options, and options are always a great thing, I think another thing is, I think there's 2 things actually I want to address. One is when you go into interviews, when you're looking for that next career path, 2 of the most underrated things that people as students are not thinking about who are you working for, and what does the training look like? Those two combined, I had the pleasure of working with your wife for, two different positions at two different companies. And when we started working in medical sales together, our training process was a 6-month long training process, right? And it was grueling. Like we were put to the test. I'm so thankful of that now that they invested in me, that they invested that time, that education into me, where I could go out and I still retain that skill sets. I still utilize those skill sets in my classroom every single day. And, and that was, they didn't have to do that. They didn't need to do that. They were setting me up for the most success to be within my position without a doubt. But I really, truly took more out of that for my own personal life, my life in general, than just helping out that company. Obviously, they got the fringe benefit of it, but so I always encourage training. Look at your training. What do your training look like? If you're entering a position right out of college and it's less than a 2-week training, to me that's a red flag. And that's a blanket statement. I hate throwing blanket statements out there for companies, but I want to know that somebody is going to invest to develop you after you come into the position. Because again, they're coming in as freshmen. They don't know what they don't know, and they think they know a lot. Every parent that's listening to this podcast is going to be like, oh yeah, my kid definitely thinks they know everything, So they think that they know it, but then there's that rude awakening they get to experience. And so really going out, finding a corporation, finding whatever it might be, even if it's personal training within yourself, go get training. And then the second thing there, I think, is who do you work for? If you have the ability to interview with your manager, who you're going to report to on a daily basis, interview with that person, like talk to that person. You go into that interview with the same idea. I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me, because as all of my positions that I've ever been a part of, the happiness level that I get to experience is based so much on my manager and my experience with my manager. Do they believe in me? Do they not believe in me? Do they like me? Do they not like me? Even coming down to my first job out of college, I got to take my manager's old territory. And at first I thought, well, this is going to be perfect. She'll know everybody. She'll be able to network me. It'll be awesome. I never considered the micromanaging that was going to be coming down the line, because she wanted me to run the territory the way she ran it. Right. And that was not my style. And so that caused conflict between us, and so I think when you go into an interview process, be loyal to people, trust people. People are going to trust you. My managers, so many managers that I've had, I would go work, really weird, bizarre jobs if they're doing it and they get to be the person who's developing, right? But if I have a bad manager, I don't care if they're going to cut me a salary of $500,000 a year. I don't know if I'm going to go work for them, because it's miserable. Why sell your happiness, to make a couple extra bucks?
Yeah. No, I love those points. I would just layer on one thing, because, we have the advantage of having, a multi-decade career at this point, a variety of different industries, a variety of different, and oftentimes a lot of that stuff isn't clear. But one thing that popped into my mind as you were kind of sharing here that I think is advantageous for young adults. And I'll speak specifically for those that are in college. One thing when I was getting my MBA that I thought was really cool is we had this assignment where we had to find a publicly traded company, and then we had to contact the CEO and go interview the CEO. And so basically I called up this bank in LA and I reached out and I was like, hey, this is who I am. I'm with the Pepperdine program. I want to sit down for an interview. And I had to call probably 15 different places, but I ended up finding this one guy that had this penthouse office, like at the tallest big building in LA. And I got to go sit up there and look at his views. And, I'm sure I stumbled and I'm sure it was a terrible interview. And he was like, why am I doing this? But I share that because you can create your own path. And I think proactiveness and creative thinking is so underrated, but it's oftentimes never communicated by older generations, and especially those that have the experience. And I say that because there's so many things that you can actually get away with when you're a young adult, right? You can say, I'm just naive and I don't really know, but I'm going to go try to meet this person. And I bet you most people are going to say, hey, I want to help you out. Like, I want to share my experience. I want to get you into this. And it was a really cool experience because in my mind, I'm like talking to this guy. I dressed up and I'm sure I looked like an idiot, but I dressed up in the best clothes that I had at the time when I was, 21 or whatever. And this guy's in a full 3-piece suit and he's overlooking the ocean and all this stuff. And in my mind, I'm asking him questions and not paying attention to his responses at all. Like, I'm just like, I can't believe this is real. I can't believe that I'm here. But I share that because I think proactiveness is a driver to so many things, right? It is the training, it's mapping the dots, behind you as you've gone. Now you understand why you had to go through certain things to find the success or find the happiness or whatever. So I would encourage young adults, but anybody really, the more proactive you can be, the more resourceful you can be, you can always find a way. You can always force an opportunity to get to something that's a little bit better or at least points you in the right direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, that's a perfect segue into the other item that I thought was pretty adequate with this conversation. To set that self up as you're kind of describing here, set goals, right? It's shocking to me how many people finish college and up until college, look, this goes back to like the things that we do for our students and for our kids. Their entire life in high school is, what is your goal and how are you going to achieve that goal? Well, you have to take history, you have to take English, you have to take math, and you got to do all these things, and then we're going to give you a diploma at that point. You come into college, first thing you do is you go and you meet a counselor. Here's the roadmap, what it's going to take for you to get to your college degree. We finished college, and as you know, I'm very fortunate that I married not only a beautiful woman, but an incredibly smart woman. And she's an ER physician here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And so through our time together, when I met her, she was in a senior or she was in her last year of medical school. And so we've been through medical school, residency together, and now as a partner in the group. And we get to convert. I get the opportunity now to converse with a lot of these physicians that, their education spans so much farther than what you and I have. And you and I have to get, right? And it's shocking to me how many of these people that we view, that put on kind of a pedestal because they're physicians and they are, they know the human anatomy incredibly well. And yet we're talking with these people and their entire life was mapped out until they got out of residency. And then they get out of residency and they almost, I've seen some of them just absolutely lose their minds. One of the guys that we know was a dear friend of ours. He couldn't pick up enough things to keep himself busy. He was a physician, and operating as a physician, but he was also part of the National Guard. He would go and he would serve our country. It was an awesome thing. He was getting his pilot license. He went back and got his MBA. He has a family of 4, and at the end, it all unraveled for him. And he ended up losing the family, and just, it was almost like there was never a set goal after he finished residency as to what is next, what else am I striving for? Early on in my life, early on in my career, early on in my relationship, we've identified things that we want to do. Yes, you have to reevaluate things on a regular basis to say, is this a realistic thing? But as you're sitting here as a senior in college, as you're sitting as a freshman in college, if you're getting ready to send your kids to college, start having those conversations. What is next? What are your goals? What do you want to strive for? What do you want to achieve for? I guarantee you, if you leave college and your goal is, I want to own a house by 25, you will find a way to own a house by 25. If you don't set a goal of when you want to own a house for, it's going to come at a time that is convenient, what works and what's right. Is that going to be by 25? Is that going to be by 45? Having kids, when's the right time to have kids? There's never a right time to have kids in your life. Like, who would ever want to just absolutely disrupt their entire life, and bring a child in at this random point? It does. But if it's part of your plan, if it's part of your strategy, then the time is right because you have that goal you need to strive for. And now it is time to bring this life in because we've achieved the things we wanted to achieve up to this point. And now we're ready to give back and give to the next generation and hopefully raise and have decent human beings. So I think that's the last thing that I would encourage anybody, that's listening is, and even if you're 45 years old, and you're sitting here and you're thinking about what's next. Like, what is next? What do you want to do? Do you want to become a master plumber? Do you want to, and if you have the goal, even if it's not written down, I know a lot of people like love vision boards and everything. I'm all for anything that's going to get to go because you just strive for your goals. But even just mental thought process, committing to yourself, this is what I'm going to go do. And then it's always in the back of your mind. I want to achieve this. I want to achieve this. I want to be making this much by this age. I want to be doing this. I want to have this. And once you actually have those that you strive for, you you strive for them without ever thinking about it.
Yep. Yep. Right. I'm not, there's nothing else to say on that other than that is the foundation for habitual growth. So I'm gonna leave it there. I know you got to get back to class anyways. That's incredible. So I appreciate the time, Kevin. Tell
Thank
people
you.
how they can find you if they want to get in touch with you.
You can find me on, probably, I guess, the easiest way would be to shoot me an email. Kevin.Kuhnen at colostate.edu, COLO state.edu. That's a great way. I'm on Instagram. My Instagram handle's awesome. It is Choice City Surfer. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, I tweet as well. I'm on X. I don't like calling it X. It's still Twitter to me, but you'll find me on Kevin Kuhnen on there. And just so you know, warning, all my tweets are going to be about CSU sports. So it's kind of nerdy on that. But yeah, and then LinkedIn obviously as well. LinkedIn's a great way to get in touch with me as well. So Kevin Kuhnen on.
Awesome. We'll make sure we tag you in all the necessary platforms as well. But
Sounds
thank
great.
you again, number one, for the conversation, the knowledge drop here. And then number two, for getting out there and making a difference. So, like I said,
Thank
I know
you.
you teach class, but keep changing those lives. I mean, these are the generations that are coming. The more information we can share, the more of our experience we can share as well. Hopefully that points people in the right direction and makes this world a better place together.
Thank you, Nate. I appreciate you, and I'm proud of what you and are doing here. So keep up the good work.
Thanks, brother. We'll talk soon.
All right, have a good one.
You too. Bye.